Ashes of Creation has progressed a lot this year. And also when it comes to combat, there were a lot of changes that were made and some were really, really good. And today we're going to have a look at those.
Hey, what up, boys? So, with the first glimpses of Alpha 2's group gameplay out, I want to discuss my first impressions of the cleric and group dynamics and give some feedback that isn't, it looks clunky, or animation looked bad, or any other brain-deadery that has taken the time to stop playing some dog furry MMO to comment on a pre-alpha showcase. Additionally, the bulk of this video will be reminiscing on how far the group gameplay has come since Alpha 1, which evidently means putting out some footage that isn't even relevant anymore, so we'll need big, flashy disclaimers on the screen so people don't get confused.
Yeah.
But before we get into that,
before and after,
our
basically.
patrons and I would love for you to grab yourself a Coca-Cola, because out of all the things I care about in Ashes of Creation, it's those pesky group dynamics, and I'll be damned if I'm gonna sit back and watch them fuck it up without at least making a bunch of videos to farm revenue from it. Now, with all that bollocks out of the way, let's begin.
I love his edits. Like Narc
So I
has
think
really
we'll start
cool
the video
edits.
off today discussing how far Intrepid have come with their group gameplay and mechanics using the pre-Alpha 1 and Alpha 1 gameplay. Therefore, please heed the warning that
when it comes to group play, I think Cleric is going to be super, super fun. Like, I have seen the Cleric, and if you guys are curious about the Cleric as well, like, check out our latest video about Ashes of Creation. And yeah, the Cleric is going to be a super fun support and healer class you can play. And it's like really cool what you can do, how you can like cleanse not only your group mates, but also buff them up and stuff. Like, there are a lot of interesting skills that go well with a group, and I think this is going to be the class you maybe want to play with a few others when you are in a group and you want to go for more of a support build or class. It's very interesting. And yeah, by the way, guys, if you're new to this channel, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more content.
what you're about to see is vastly outdated footage and obviously doesn't represent Ashes of Creation in its current form. It's very painful to give this disclaimer, but it appears this project has turned a lot of new eyes lately, which is great, don't get me wrong, but a lot of the comments I'm receiving have been pretty disingenuously negative towards the project. Hey, it's not our fault Furry Flight and Bug World is complete dog water, is it? So let's start with how far we've come. During the pre-alpha showcase and Alpha 1, the game was featuring a primitive version of root motion-based hybrid combat that was very reminiscent of what MMOs like New World currently have. The game ended up in this state because feedback from their Battle Royale a few years prior directed them towards the feeling of weight. Intrepid attempted to introduce this weight through fixed animations that kept you committed to your attacks. However, after the Alpha 1 was released and everyone got their hands on it, most people weren't too impressed, myself included, and pretty much told Intrepid, you dumb fucked up.
Yeah, it's like boring
after
combat.
3 weeks of scrambling around to try and fix it, towards the end of the Alpha 1 cycle, they introduced a much more free-flowing attack style where you could move at will whilst swinging your weapon.
And this is so much better. Like let's have a look at this again. Like, look how clunky this one looks and how this looks actually when you have like the freedom to move and stuff. Like, it looks less stiff, and I think it's good. I think this was one of the better changes they've done.
Where you could move at will whilst swinging your weapon, a much better iteration. However, it retains the obvious flaws that Guild Wars 2 had, as it was pretty much a one-for-one copy of that game's combat. Now, moving on to the group gameplay during Alpha 1, it was very basic. Synergies didn't really exist, however. Basic healing, tanking, and DPSing did. Tanks could hold aggro very well and take a solid beating, where the cleric provided the sustain in a very traditional click the health bar and use the healing spell kind of way. My preferred way to heal in an MMORPG, and in my opinion, the only way to create compelling, challenging, Trinity-based group encounters. The alternative is AoE cleave healing spells from games like Wildstar or Guild Wars 2, and when encounters are designed in a way that accommodates for that, you as a healer feel very spammy and not very impactful within the group. Therefore, I was overall pleased with the foundations they laid during Alpha 1.
Like what I hate the most about healers in MMOs, and if you have such a healer that can only purely spam two skills and doesn't do much else. Like I think if you want to make like a healer fun in an MMO, and that's my personal opinion, that's why I like actually healing a lot in Final Fantasy XIV as well, is if you have at least some sort of rotation or skills that you need to keep up, and you're like sort of like a hybrid between DPS and a healer, right? Like I don't want to be just standing there. I press like 2-3 skills and just spam them. I don't have like an actual rotation or something I need to give to my group around. Like let's say I have a skill that has like a 1 minute cooldown, for example, and it buffs someone damage by a lot, by 15 seconds or something, and I have to rotate this around. Then I need to reapply a dot. I have some AoE rotation. So do we have now single target? Do we have an AoE phase? And I have like skills I can switch around and use for each phase. So we have this AoE phase, so I keep this one buff up. I have a heal over time, I have a direct heal, and I have dots, and I have an AoE skill. Then I have another skill that hits harder, but it's single target I use for like the big boss fight or something. Like I like to do this as a healer if I have like a certain rotation, and it's like multiple skills and not just 2-3 skills, but like maybe 4, even like 5 skills I have to rotate around quite frequently. I think this makes it more fun than spamming 2-3 buttons only. So the best healer in my opinion is one that's more versatile and that can also fit in some other roles, at least by a portion, like a side DPS, or if you have some sort of paladin character and for some reason your tank ends up dying or something, maybe you have like an instant resurrect, but you have maybe some cooldown or something that you can for a few seconds at least tank or something for your group. Like I think it's cool if you have like multiple functions on the healer and not just be purely a healer. But that's just my personal opinion. And the interesting rotation as a healer is very important to also make combat and especially like longer fights not boring.
But as I said, the Alpha 1 iteration of healing and group synergies wasn't exactly ideal. Fast forward to this month's livestream and we have our first look at some basic group gameplay against non-elites, a glimpse at some basic healing spells, and the core mechanics of Ashes of Creation's skill synergy systems. Wow! Only took them 14 months.
That's good.
This game's not a scam, guys, I swear. So, what are my first impressions
look at those
of
chains.
it then?
They're
Well,
so
to be
cool.
honest, because the tank archetype wasn't present, the cleric wasn't fully fleshed out with a full roster of spells, they were fighting pleb mobs and were quite literally level 15, I think judging the balance and gameplay of this is a ridiculous notion to even consider. But it is great to finally see how far they've come
almost
since
died.
Alpha 1, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the spells fleshed out and what new synergy effects we can see beyond the one that was shown. So let's discuss this next with some baseless speculation and information I pulled straight out of thin air. It's fairly obvious that synergies between players in an MMORPG is a core requirement for making this genre enjoyable. There is many ways to do this, however, to understand the type of game Ashes of Creation is aiming to be, it's important to outline the core mechanics of the equipment between the classes, as it functions slightly different to what you're probably used to. Ashes of Creation is using a traditional Dungeons & Dragons stat, weapon, and armor style template. This means you are not restricted by your armor type. You can be a mage in heavy armor if you so wish. This will obviously come with benefits and drawbacks, but
This is the same like Elder Scrolls Online actually. I actually had on the Magicka Dragon Knight, for example, like I play also quite often a Magicka Dragon Knight in Elder Scrolls Online, and I have like multiple setups for it. I have one setup that is in heavy armor, one hand and shield, and it's still a DPS setup. It's mostly for PvP, by the way. And I have one with freaking light armor and 2 staffs. And I think it is actually interesting how I can have 2 unique builds that both fit in the same role, but that are different. One's heavy armor and one is light armor, and both have their benefits and drawbacks. Like, I think this is really what is cool about, like, if you have some sort of freedom in an MMO game, where you can have one class, but inside your class you have different kind of builds and varieties that include different weapons and armor types, right? Like once if you want to go dual wield or you want to go two-handed, but in one you want to be medium armor on a warrior and one you want to be heavy armor. I also had this on the warden, for example. I had a setup with a bow and two-handed sword, and I had a setup with a two-handed sword and a sword and a board and heavy armor, and one was in medium. And I think that's cool if you can actually build like this in MMOs. And you can, if you ever get burnt out of your character and you're this kind of person that just has a main character, always plays it, you have always the option to add some variety, something different to your existing character and try a different playstyle. One thing I'm wondering though in Ashes of Creation, so you can have like multiple types of weapons too, right? Like you're not stuck to one if I'm not mistaken, right? So how is it with this? Like if you switch this and stuff, can you actually somehow adjust it to like not lose so much DPS, or can you like respec certain skills or something? Like I'm actually wondering how this goes with like the weapon skills and stuff like that, right? And I know like certain, like here we see this for example, dull one-handed sword, additional stats, physical damage bonus. So from what I'm guessing and seeing is like certain weapons give you certain bonuses. So maybe for certain fights, certain weapons will outperform the other one, but then in other situations it's the other one again. But the question is, how flexible is this if you switch your weapons and stuff in Ashes of Creation? I'm very curious about that, but we will see in the near future and we will see during the beta phase.
That's exactly how Dungeons and Dragons works. Additionally, the classes in Ashes of Creation are aiming to stick to a strict Trinity system with targeting that functions similar to Tab. However, the way attacks and abilities work actually puts this MMO into the hybrid category, mixing a smooth cocktail blend of both action and Tab-based abilities. The benefits of this is that it allows for a more traditional teamwork gameplay loop like World of Warcraft, but introduces interesting skill shots and movement abilities that give the combat increased pace and freedom. Exactly
Kind of
the
like
kind
New
of
World,
traits
right?
people want from action combat. Finally, Ashes of Creation's classes themselves are aimed to have a high focus on class identity. Not every class
That's
is going to have
important.
access to heals or efficient ranged damage or high defensive capabilities. You need to play to the strengths of your class and rely on others to actually succeed in the world of Vera. And this is where synergies come into play. You see, without strict class identity and reliance on teamwork, you end up with a game that feels very shallow and lonely, kind of like most
Yeah.
of our currently popular MMOs. And this combo system they introduced allows more synergies to happen beyond just a standard healer keeping you alive. You see, the example we were given during the showcase was a condition effect called Stagger. This was basically a silence for physical skills that you can apply through two abilities shown during the showcase: the fighter's Whirlwind and the cleric's Chains of Restraint. However,
And this is very important, I think, when it comes to group play, to have something that you offer to the group that the others not have or that goes well with it. I give you guys a crazy example. Like, what is if you play on some sort of rogue kind of a character, and because you are rogue, you have a very high crit chance, for example, as a DPS. And then you have one class with you that not increases the crit chance but the crit damage. Like imagine how well this goes together. So you're on a class that crits a lot, but your crit damage isn't that super high. Like maybe some other classes have lower crit chance but higher crit damage. And then suddenly you have someone in the group that's buffing your crit damage like crazy. I know it will be crazy broken, and this is kind of like oh, then you have to always have this kind of class because it's DPS meta. But I think that is kind of interesting, right? If you do like a little bit more DPS if you're with someone than like another class, but then maybe the other class that doesn't have so much high crit damage gets another buff from some class, where suddenly you have like either an additional aura around you or something that maybe increases your crit chance as well or something that maybe increases the healing done or something. Like I think they can have some sort of puzzles where each class goes well with another class. However, it won't be the meta because another class gets some other sort of benefit or something. That would be actually interesting for like dungeon runs then too, because you will always want to find one of this class and one of this class to have around. Like, what if melee warriors get some buff where everyone gets like more resistance if they combine their skills with a healer? And if you're like some sort of glass cannon sort of build, some rogue style, you do actually a bit more damage, but you're squishy or something. This will be interesting to see how this will play out in group play. Like, I can see some interesting combinations. Or where if you are a caster, like a mage, and you have this one class, your cast time is a bit faster. Wow. I think this will be very fun.
The interesting thing about these status effects is that when two status
Or
effects
burning
are comboed
effects
together,
turn to
it generates
explosions
a
by
much
somebody else's
stronger
skill.
effect. In the case of two staggers, mobs are stunned for a short duration. If you're
Well, that's
watching this
cool.
video and don't know what stunned is, I suggest you seek help and question why you're watching a video about
But you
MMORPGs.
can't stun if you play yourself
This combo
like that.
system is a pretty interesting concept and one that I don't think has actually been attempted before. You'll have to let me know in the comments though for any of the niche MMOs that attempt this.
But one thing I'm worried about how to balance is, like I said earlier, what if there's some aura that makes your crit damage higher, but you're a class that has the highest crit chance or something? Like, they need to find ways to balance this though. This will be a bit tricky, right? Because what if you always want to have those 2 or 3 because their combo is stronger than other archetypes combos? They have to be careful with that though.
This mechanic. The closest thing we have to a teamwork combo effect like this is Guild Wars 2's combo and finisher mechanic, where someone puts down a field of a certain type, water, fire, air, poison, etc, etc, and executing a finisher within this field will generate a different effect. The finishers are categorized into different types, like
I didn't know
blast,
that, actually.
whirl, and projectile, and depending on which type you use, it did
I know
something
Guild Wars 2,
different.
but I
A
didn't
cool
know this.
concept, but in my 10,000 hours of experience, it's rarely used as a mechanic outside of group buffs. But is Ashes of Creation's version better? Well, we obviously don't know this until the full roster of combo and status effects
until
are
we
released,
tested
but
it
I think
also.
it's safe to say that we've likely seen the most extreme version of it. I expect to see some more traditional effects being distributed in this way, like knockbacks, roots, and disarming, as these are all pretty hardcore crowd control abilities that, in my opinion, should not be wielded at the whim of just a single player. It also makes me wonder how some other effects will be handled. Are we going to get a double poison proc, creating a toxin effect that reduces incoming healing, or maybe a sunder effect that armor breaks and makes players, mobs, or bosses take increased physical or magical damage? The possibilities are quite literally infinite during this early stage, so I'd love to hear your ideas down in the comments below whilst we conclude this video with a quick discussion about the cleric's direction. So, in my opinion, the direction the cleric seems to be going is pretty damn solid. If we assume all the spells from the Alpha 1 cleric are going to retain their functionalities with this new direction, the core of the cleric is exactly what I would be looking for in a main healing class. But it's important to highlight that because of the lack of self-sustain in other classes, not to make the cleric too damn powerful as an individual. Drawbacks and high levels of management need to be introduced for the class to feel rewarding and meaningful to play, which leads me onto the first reveals of a class mechanic in the form of Cleric's Conviction, and I was so pleased to finally see a class mechanic in action. We only got a tease during this showcase, no doubt saving the full discovery of it for Alpha 2 in 2077, that's if we're lucky of course, and we were only able to grab 2 screenshots to reveal what it actually does. The first is from the Cleansing Wave ability, aka the Chain Heal, explaining that every single stack of Conviction you have, your Chain Heal jumps to an additional target within range and applies a buff that removes negative status effects. Pretty damn interesting. Oh, sorry.
This was very important, always this kind of effect in Elder Scrolls Online, because there are sometimes very hard-hitting dots, especially in PvP. If you get hit by like a fire siege weapon or something during a siege, like a assault on a keep or something, and if you had like a Templar, and you had like this kind of dot that either kills you or gets you really low so you can be killed easily. Like, it was just so important to always have at least one Templar around that has this cleansing sort of skill. So you can use the synergy. And what was interesting, you have to actually, in ESO, like you have to manually consume it basically. So you're standing in some glowing circle and then you press on your synergy and then the synergy gets consumed and you are cleansed and stuff. And I think that's really, really cool as well. I wonder how they're gonna do this here. Like, it's just gonna do it automatically, right? Because here, in the tooltip, it says the most... Wait, let me read this. Whenever a target with this buff receives a healing effect, the buff is consumed and removes the most recent negative... So this is actually good because it automatically does that, so you can focus on whatever you're doing. Like, this is something actually some people pointed out in Elder Scrolls Online, even though they like to manually activate it once they're standing in this kind of circle. If you're busy with something else, like, you have to click extra and yeah. But it's okay, it's cool, I think. But you can't spare it for an emergency, right? But then again, it's like instantly it doesn't stay somewhere, right? So yeah,
target
makes
within
sense.
range and applies a buff that removes negative status effects. Pretty damn interesting. Oh,
It's
sorry,
good.
did I say
You want
interesting?
this.
I meant exactly what I expected. But we can get further insight from another ability, Communal Restoration, aka a basic AoE heal around the cleric, explaining that for every stack of conviction the cleric has, upon being healed by Communal Restoration, they receive 1% maximum
That's
health
nice.
as temporary hit points. Again, pretty damn interesting, but also pretty useless, as we don't really know the context of basically anything. But it makes it seem like the cleric will be
That's
kind
more
of like
DPS,
a set up
basically.
your conviction
That's
for
what
a
I'm reading out
massive
here.
payoff kind of playstyle. And I hope as conviction increases, the spells that are consuming it will have their spell effect increase to reflect the increase in power. I think that would be
What
a
are
nice
those roots, by
aesthetic
the way? They
benefit
look
to
cool.
go alongside the gameplay. Overall, I liked the balance of free and rooted casting you have whilst using your abilities, but remember, if you make one particular class too powerful, players may end up gravitating towards that for soloing. And that's where secondary augments come into play. I get the feeling because this latest showcase wasn't specifically labeled as a cleric showcase,
But this is a question that we have to ask ourselves. Do we need all classes to perform super good solo? What if there's one class that's better solo but less good with a partner, and another class is a bit better with a partner? Like, I think there's nothing wrong with having niche classes that are shining a little bit more in one area than the other. So one is the top solo class, one is the top group class or something, for example. And then you're also eager to have actually an alt, right? Because then you maybe want to have those two leveled up or something. I'm wondering actually how alt friendly Ashes of Creation will be like. Because I'm actually tempted to play a cleric, but I also want to play some sort of mage-like character if I can, right? And the archer looks really cool. I've pointed out in a couple of videos too. I really like the ranger. I think it is a very, very fun archetype as well, right? So, I don't know. I tend to either cleric, some sort of mage, or the ranger, the archer. Like, I will see what I'm gonna grind up, but if I can have like alts and it's like easy to have this, I would definitely go for one cleric and then either a mage or like the ranger. I would pick between those two. And I have like my two characters I want to focus on. And my cleric I will build purely for like group play and most likely go the healer route. And I will be like good DPS on my ranger or mage.
it was,
That's my
after
goal.
all, labeled as night and day, with just a sprinkle of cleric in the forefront. We've still got an upcoming secondary augment showcase fleshing out how skill trees and customization works sometime in the future. There are plenty of concerns to be raised when it comes to the direction Ashes of Creation seem to be going with their customization and 64 class stream, but I've already expressed my concerns in a 4-episode series about the combat direction as a whole, so instead of repeating myself here today, I will instead direct you to that video up here in the top corner and conclude today's video with a question for you, my dear viewer. Resource management is a very important part of MMORPG
True.
gameplay for me. When I see classes
Yeah.
like fighters, tanks, and rogues using a mana bar, it's very concerning for me because I personally do not think melee classes function very well with a large mana pool to spend their abilities out
True.
of. Obviously, mana works very well for support classes.
And you're also spreading your sustain then, right? Like, what is if you want, what if you use both bars, right? Like, you have your stamina bar and you have your magicka bar, but you're on like a stamina class, for example. Then how do you manage to use those skills that cost the mana, but you still have like a high stamina pool for your stamina? Because then you have to spread your stats, right? So you want to have like a few points in there, a few points in there. But doesn't that lead to actually a decrease in DPS? Like, because you can use this skill just a few times and this skill just a few times. And I don't know how it's gonna scale as well with like the cost, the this and that. So I don't know if it's too good to go this kind of hybrid resource route. Like, I think it's better to just drain on one pool and focus on one pool, right? I don't know. Like, how are they going to do this actually when the game comes out? Would it just be a mana bar purely for everyone? Will they get 2 bars? I don't know.
classes, as it acts as a way of soft gating a raid's potential through attrition against other PvP raids or against bosses in the open world. However, generally, across the long term, it feels bad for a melee class to be gated by mana in any kind of way. Steven did give us some hints of a stamina bar for block management, among other things, but how do you guys feel about resource management in an MMORPG? Should we be managing multiple universal resource pools, or should some classes have unique resource management that sets them apart from each other? I think World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV probably handles this part of class design the best, and I hope Intrepid are looking towards their implementation of class resources, mechanics, and user interface to convey how...
I have an easy solution for this. Depending on what archetype, what class you play, one is called mana and one is called stamina. That's just simple. Then you have just one resource bar and it has either name, right? And it just changes based on your class, and whatever skill you use just costs this resource. Or everyone just has mana, and like freaking stamina sort of skills cost mana or something, but your region, all your stats go into just this one pool. So it's like a universal kind of bar, right? That goes for both, but you don't have like two bars. That would be actually weird, I think, because then yeah, you have to spread so much your sustain and your stats, and it's like a disadvantage then. And this is also the problem then. And how can you balance a warrior kind of character with like a mage kind of character, right? Because then one has to use both bars or both like stats, right? And one is just using one, and you just like not so maybe good with like blocking and moving around and stuff, or sprinting. I don't know how they're gonna balance this, but I think they should just do it like they do in maybe World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV. Like, I think the best approach would be, depending on your class, you have like one bar, and this resource gets a name based on whatever you pick. For one it's called stamina, for one it's called mana, and that's it.
Classes play later down the pipeline of development. On a final note, I would just like to add that Ashes of Creation is looking to create a traditional adventure out in the largest MMORPG open world we've ever seen in this genre.
I think it's
You'll
fun,
be incentivized to work with your
stuff.
friends and meet new strangers on your journey, naturally creating a teamwork dynamic to reduce that risk out there and increase your reward.
Yeah, difficult
These will
quests,
not be the same
world
kind
bosses.
of play as you interact with in our currently popular MMOs, where you're being auto-grouped with people just looking to complete a linear dungeon. It will be a proper open-world adventure that makes you want to get to know these people that you're grouped with, so you can call upon them again in the future. It's this aspect of Ashes of Creation's gameplay and world that makes me super excited, and as they continue to show off how far they've come with their group-focused gameplay, you can bet your ass this MMORPG is gonna start looking more and more exciting. So let's all hope that we don't all die of a copium overdose, or more likely die of old age by the time it finally arrives. But as usual, I am just one nerd desperate for a good MMO, and my opinion means nothing without yours in the comments below. And hey, I just wanted to add a note on the end here for Intrepid and say, your last live stream was exactly what we wanted to see. Don't take the negativity to heart and go changing anything drastic about the way you show us the game and the pace at which you're releasing things. It's your personal style and Steven's awful gameplay that we've come to love. And from my perspective, it just makes me more excited to finally jump in myself and see it from the perspective of someone who isn't a boomer. So please, continue doing you, Intrepid. We're here to support you.
But Narc, according to the remaining 4% of players who are still sucking in the copium from the world, they think the showcase was complete and utter, quote-unquote, dog water. They are suggesting, how can I put this without being dismantled? They're suggesting that Intrepid do a complete 180 and ruin their game just like Amazon Game Studios did with theirs.
And to that
I think this will not happen.
Listen, kids, I know it sucks that New World flopped
I'll tell you in a
hard.
moment
Trust
why.
me, it's the only Western MMO to be released in the last God knows how many years, but at some point, you gotta open your eyes and realize that if you think Amazon Game Studios is ever gonna fix New World's core problems, then you're high on copium.
I knew this would come. But I actually think they are very careful now. Because of New World, because of the decline of player base in World of Warcraft, because of the people stopping to play freaking Elder Scrolls Online, and even with like Black Desert Online, some people have also quit there already because it's very repetitive, like it feels repetitive. So I'm pretty sure that like Intrepid Studios, they know what the heck they are doing now, because they have seen the fault and the mistakes that other companies did with their MMOs. Like, it would be dumb if they crash the game against the wall and they ruin everything. Like, they're not gonna do this. They're gonna be very, very careful. And that's probably also one of the reasons why they are developing it for so long, because maybe like this is something that's going on behind the scenes and I can just speculate. Like, I have no proof or no evidence that this is the case, but I actually think that they had an earlier release in mind before New World actually failed at first. Like, now they fixed New World a bit and it's better. Like, it's definitely better than before New World. There's still some issues though, but it has improved. But because of New World, I think they decided, hey, you know what, let's take a bit longer with the development. We have seen some games crash against the wall. We not want to do this. We want our game to prosper and stay alive for many years and be still played like even 5-6 years after release. Like, that's, I'm pretty sure, what they are planning for Ashes of Creation. So I'm positive it's gonna be good. And yeah, if you guys are new to this channel, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more content. And how do you feel about the combat? Do you like the changes and the progress they have made? And also with like the other things they have added, like with seasons and stuff, like the weather and all that. Like how they have like a new Unreal Engine now and all that. I think this is very, very good. Like, I like all the progress that changes. It makes me even like less patient actually. Like, I wish the game would come out next year, because I really want to play it, right? But I know if it comes out too early, it's gonna be dog shit. So yeah, Intrepid Studios, take your time, even though we hate to wait, but we better wait and get a good game than a rushed release that sucks, just like, yeah, unfortunately New World did when it was released, full of mistakes, bugs, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give this one a thumbs up, and I wish everyone a wonderful day. I will see you guys next time.